I'm Lynn Jennings, Vice President for Grants Management at the Legal Services Corporation, and we have a distinguished panel this morning to talk to us about the challenges of providing civil legal services in a rural setting. To my left is Adrienne Worthy, the Executive Director of West Virginia, Legal Aid of West Virginia. Next to her is Courtney Kloos, who is a staff attorney at Legal Aid of West Virginia and was also a 2016 Rural Summer Legal Fellow. And lastly, on the left side, we have Carmel Joseph, who is a current law student at Quinnipiac University School of Law, and she was a 2019 Rural Summer Legal Corps Fellow. To my right is John Asher, who is the Executive Director of Colorado Legal Services. Next to him is Amy Pritchard, who is an Assistant Professor of Clinical Education at the University of Arkansas, William H. Bowen School of Law. And lastly, Case Rodwell, who is a current staff attorney at Oklahoma Indian Legal Services and is a former Rural Summer Legal Corps Fellow from 2017. Just to give you some sense of the statistics around poverty in the rural setting, nearly 10 million rural residents have family incomes below 125% of the federal poverty level and are financially eligible for LSE-funded services. Rural America has a consistently higher poverty rate than many metropolitan areas, 16.4% in rural counties compared to 12.9% in urban counties. Currently, about 1 in 3 rural counties have a poverty rate above 20%. And for some populations, like single mothers with children, the rural poverty rate is close to 44%. Access to any lawyer is limited for rural Americans. 20% of the nation's population resides in rural communities, but only 2% of lawyers serve these communities. So with that as a backdrop, I'm going to turn it over to Adrienne, Amy, and John first for them to describe their organization's service area, what challenges they face in providing access to civil legal aid, and what innovations they're using. I'm going to start with Adrienne, who will need to project, and then we'll move to John and Amy. Adrienne.
Well, I grew up in a family that we fondly called ourselves the Loud Family, so I hope that you all can hear me. I did want to start by saying I'm going to mention some fairly negative statistics about West Virginia, but I want to say that one of the best things about living in West Virginia is the kindness of the people, the warmth, just a really, really welcoming group of individuals. And being here in Arkansas for the last 2 days, I have felt right at home. Everywhere we've gone, people have been just all smiles and checking on us to make sure we're having a good time, and that felt really great. So thank you for making me feel at home. My service area is among the most rural in the country. I think in varying statistics they say it is 3rd or 4th most rural in the country. We have about 1.8 million people, and one of the really telling statistics for me about the direction that West Virginia is going is that we have fewer people in West Virginia now than we did in the 50s and 60s. The out-migration in West Virginia is stunning, and particularly among young people and college-educated individuals. The second statistic I would give you is that I live in the capital city, Charleston. And when I moved to West Virginia 39 years ago, it was a booming place. The chemical industry was big, the coal mines were working, and there was a lot of activity there. Right now, Charleston is struggling to stay above 50,000. And that's, of course, the magic mark for lots of federal dollars. And to be the capital city in an already rural state that is struggling to stay at 50,000 is telling. Some of the other things about West Virginia that are typical, I think, of rural areas is that we tend to be older, we tend to be sicker, and we tend to be poorer than many other places. our geography is lots and lots of small towns grouped in areas along mountain valleys. And you'll have populations of 500 or 200 or 1,000. And again, those towns are not growing. They're either hanging on to what they've got or they're losing population. Many of the cities or the counties, West Virginia has a pretty strong county structure. We have 55 counties. As noted by the Justice, we have counties that have very few lawyers in those counties. 1, 2, 3 lawyers in the counties that sometimes can include the judge and the prosecuting attorney. And so if you take the mountainous terrain, the poor, old, sick individuals that live in those counties, and add on that there are few attorneys that are practicing in the very rural areas, that paints a bit of a picture. I think the final statistic that really has been among the most distressing in the last 5 years is that West Virginia has been at the epicenter of the opioid epidemic. And it has been a painful thing to watch and to be a part of. We have seen communities that were already struggling because of a lack of infrastructure, a lack of growth, really struggling even harder because of the impact that the opioid epidemic has had on those communities. Devastating a whole generation of young people. And we may or may not have hit bottom yet. And so the challenges that are present to a legal services program are immense. And we have several different ways that I don't know are particularly innovative. Lynn asked us to address that, but I think retro office structure, we feel very, very committed to having a 12 office structure spread around our state with people who circuit ride to the varying communities around that. We can't have a lawyer in every station full-time in every county, but we very much want to have a person who is in each of the counties regularly to build connections, have relationships, work with local providers through partnerships to give access points to the folks who live in those communities. As you all know, delivering services in a rural community is built upon trust. And for us to have relationships with clients, for people to get in the door, we have to work with local providers, build that trust so that people will then turn to legal aid for help. So while we have technology in our program, while we have video conferencing and wonderful phone systems, a really great intake system, we are relying a lot for services on the good old-fashioned, get a person in that county, build relationships with the local service providers, and try and provide holistic services in that manner.
Great, thank you very much for that. John, how are things in Colorado?
Well, as of Wednesday, they were, I think, okay, but find out tomorrow. No, but thank you for including Colorado in discussion of rural delivery, which is certainly a challenge. Colorado is by area the 8th largest state in the country with over 100,000 square miles. In the past 8 to 10 years, Colorado population has grown by 13 to 15%, but that growth has been very uneven. Rural areas continue to lose population. Rural areas of Colorado have a disproportionate number of low-income adults and an even higher percentage of poor children. The Colorado people tend to think of Denver, Vail, Aspen, but Colorado is not only large, it has a very large eastern plains. People may not realize it, but to drive from Denver to the Kansas border is over 2 hours. We then have the Front Range, which goes from essentially from Cheyenne to Albuquerque, up and down I-25. That's where most of the people live. To the west of that Front Range is a large mountain area from just west of Denver to what we call the Western Slope, which is the area around right to the Utah border. Colorado is 64 counties. 2 of Colorado counties have no licensed or registered attorneys. There's 1 licensed and registered attorney in 4 counties, and there's 6 counties in which there are 2 licensed and registered attorneys. So there are 11 counties with 2 or fewer lawyers. In south central Colorado, the San Luis Valley, there are about 50 attorneys, maybe a little more. None under the age of 55. None under the age of 55. It is difficult for us to recruit legal aid lawyers to go to some rural areas, but it's equally difficult to find doctors to go to those areas. It's difficult to find lawyers who are willing to take over practices from very successful lawyers who are getting ready to retire. So what do we do about that disjunction between where clients are and where a lot of people want to live and practice? One, we got a generous and very helpful Pro Bono Innovation Fund grant from the corporation, and then got a second sustainability grant to try to pilot a variety of clinic models to use Denver metropolitan lawyers to serve rural Coloradans. Some of those have worked better than others, but we have monthly Ask a Lawyer programs where mostly associates, but some partners in a big Denver lawyer. They provide computers, they provide dinner for the associates, and they have both scheduled and simply call in from now almost 40 counties out of those 64 in rural Colorado where people can get advice from a lawyer about their legal problems. We have some clinics that focus on record sealing and expungement, some on family law. Some use Zoom and video conferencing. There are other areas, people don't really realize it. We have pockets of Colorado where there's no broadband access, and the bar is trying to deal with that. That's not a legal aid or a poverty issue. We have lawyers in some rural areas who literally have to drive an hour to get enough connectivity to e-file their pleadings in the federal court or in state appellate courts in Denver. So we have tried to do what we can to link urban lawyers with rural needs. We encourage courts and work with local courts to increase the use of video conferencing. And then we are working closely with our 2 law schools, University of Denver, the University of Colorado, to try to help with recruitment of law students and lawyers willing to practice in rural Colorado. I know I started in, the Justice talked about starting in rural Arkansas. I started my legal aid career now 48 years ago in Greeley, Colorado. Small town I had never heard of. Came from law school and I knew about Go West Young. So I figured if Horace Greeley was right about going west, I'd do it too. It was a town of 25,000 people. Started in legal aid. I earned $9,000 a year when I started my practice, and my wife and I saved money because you couldn't spend that in Greeley. Go to a movie once a month and a 6-pack of beer on Friday, and that was your expenses. So I talk to law students about what a wonderful place a rural community is to learn to be a lawyer. In Denver, we have specialized, by the way, the big firms in Denver, when I earned $9,000, were paying $15,000 a year, and we had no idea how somebody going to a big firm was worth so much more than we were, but different. So I tell students what a great place it is to learn to be a lawyer. It's a more civilized practice. In Denver, you can be a jerk and may never have the same lawyer on the other side in a whole career. In a small community, people know about it. So we'll get back to that. And then I say, you know, in Denver, people are paying a lot of money from farm to table food. In La Junta, Colorado, that's called your back door. So we do what we can to recruit that. We have used each year, we have gotten a rural summer legal corps member, very good young lawyers. So far they haven't come back, but I think they will at some point. But we assign them to the Western Slope out of our Grand Junction office, and we hope we provide a really good experience for those summer corps. We want them well supervised. We want them to do meaningful work for us. And then just lastly, Colorado was one of the 7 states to get a Justice for All grant to look at issues of access to justice for 100% of the poverty population. An ambitious effort to do an assessment of what was available and to develop a strategic plan. I and a young lawyer in our program who very good leadership development chaired the rural subcommittee. And part of that strategic plan focused on the specific needs, challenges, and hopefully solutions to the issue of rural delivery, and we are now in the process with the Access to Justice Commission trying to implement that plan.
Great, thank you, John. Amy, tell us about Arkansas.
Sure, thank you. And so I work at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. I'm a law professor, but I did work with both the legal aid programs in the state. I started out at Legal Aid of Arkansas, and when I transitioned to the law school, I actually worked on the helpline at the Center for Arkansas Legal Services for a few years. Similar to West Virginia and Colorado, Arkansas has a lot of issues related to poverty in our rural communities. We have a geography, there are a lot of Arkansans in the room, but for those of you who aren't from Arkansas, we have very different geographies depending on which part of the state you're in. In the northwest part of the state, the Ozarks, we have rolling hills with windy roads, and it can take a really long time to go from one town to another. And then you move over to the east side of the state, and we're the western side of the Mississippi. So we're the delta flat land that can go on forever. Similarly, issues with broadband access, cell phone access in rural communities. We've got consistent generational poverty. We have over 20 counties that are in persistent poverty, which means that in our census ratings over the past 3 decades, those same counties are showing up as being in poverty each year. And those counties are mostly rural, and they're losing population as economic opportunity leaves those regions. So a lot of the population that is mobile is moving to urban centers, and the people that are staying are the people that don't have mobility and don't have the ability to go elsewhere. A lot of southern rural land in Arkansas, southern part of Arkansas, is held as heirs property. So a lot of families purchase this land up to a century ago, and that property hasn't been transferred down through the different generations. A lot of that is in rural African American communities where there was a migration of families out of Arkansas, and those families didn't necessarily transfer titles. So there's a lot of economic opportunity that cannot be accessed by rural families because they can't get clear title to their property. And it's to address that, both legal aid programs have done a lot of strategic planning to develop programs to leverage resources in rural areas. There are medical legal partnerships in rural areas. There are pro bono partnerships with business communities, which you'll hear about later. And a lot of projects have been piloted, help desks in rural areas, and then the Legal Aid of Arkansas just received a pro bono innovation grant to really increase the efficiency and effectiveness of its pro bono services. So I'm going to spend the rest of my time talking about what the University of Arkansas at Little Rock has done to address rural needs. We're here in Little Rock in the center of the state, and we've developed several courses for students to get out into rural communities to address legal needs. The first is our part-time practicum student program. Now, we attract a lot of part-time students who may come from as far away as West Memphis, which is 2 hours away, Texarkana, and they're planning on going back to those rural communities to serve. We have, they usually take classes in the night and can't do a normal field placement during the day because they'll have jobs or they'll be traveling. So we paired up with rural judges and prosecutors who, a lot of whom don't have access to legal research. They may be one judge covering several counties in every subject area. And these students are paired with rural judges and rural lawyers, and they'll do legal research for them. They'll help them brief issues. They'll review pleadings. So they're learning the practice of law under a judge or a prosecutor while helping that judge and prosecutor serve more clients and address more legal issues. Professor Suzanne Penn developed the Delta Experience in the Delta Clinic, which goes into Southeast Arkansas, and she brings her students there in the summer to do legal outreach. And from that, they do intake and help individuals who need to divorce a spouse. So sometimes individuals have been trying to get a divorce for 10, 20, 30 years, but have never been able to afford an attorney or get into a court on their own. So students actually help these individuals process their divorces and access any benefits or property that they may be entitled to through that. Similarly, I worked on for 3 years an heirs property project with UAPB, helping family owners of forest land work on clearing title to their land in Southwest Arkansas. So we brought students down to Southwest Arkansas. They were able to see rural communities and help families on this legal issue that could lead to some economic opportunity. So the goal in these programs is not only to help meet the justice gap, because we have law students who are learning how to practice law, but also to expose them to issues of legal need in rural communities, so that when they're policymakers or when they're attorneys or when they're working in a firm, they'll think about the legal needs in rural communities, think about volunteering, but also think about helping to provide resources to those programs to ensure that legal access is met in rural communities.
Great, thank you so much for that. You know, one of the ways that LSC is trying to help meet the divide here is through its Rural Summer Legal Corps, which was a brainchild of the John Levy and the Pro Bono Task Force, and John did all of the fundraising for it. And it's a privately funded initiative that we launched in 2016, and in partnership with Equal Justice Works, which is a nonprofit in Washington, D.C., we work to recruit 35 Rural Summer Legal Corps Fellows to go to LSC-funded grantees in rural communities to provide legal services. So they receive a stipend, of $5,000 for the summer, and they provide experience for that. And since we've launched it in 2016, 118 students have worked at 59 host sites all over America, serving 80 rural counties in the U.S. So we are currently in the recruitment phase for the summer of 2020, and I believe that both you two will be getting another Rural Summer Legal Corps Fellow this summer. But we are fortunate enough to have Carmel, Case, and Courtney tell us about their experience. So we're going to launch in with them and ask them what attracted them to apply for the Rural Summer Legal Corps, why they wanted to work in a rural area, and to tell us a little bit about their experience at their grantee. So Carmel, let's start with you.
Okay, so, try to be a little bit louder. So as you know, my name is Carmel and I'm still a law student at Quinnipiac. What attracted me...
Can you speak up, please?
I'll speak up even more, okay. What attracted me to signing up and joining the Rural Summer Legal Corps Student Fellowship was because I actually grew up in rural upstate New York. So it gave me an opportunity to return back home and take the skills that I learned back at school and bring them to my community where I could help out or provide more assistance because I understand by living in a rural community what it's like and the different challenges that everybody else on the panel has been talking about. So it was a great opportunity for that. I really wanted to do this particular fellowship because when I found out that the fellowship project I would be working on was focused on the opioid epidemic, that really was close and personal to me. In my senior year of high school, a really close friend of mine and my neighbor passed away because of the opioid epidemic. So it meant a lot for me to be able to go back home and be able to help out the people in the surrounding communities that really need that assistance and really need that help. And understanding that the opioid epidemic it's more than just the epidemic. Like, it affects the home, it affects, the education, it affects public benefits, it affects so much. So being able to be a fellow in that area and provide that assistance really attracted me and made being a part of this fellowship even more worthwhile to me. And then, again, it also gave me like a great opportunity to use my skills from law school and really learn from practicing attorneys, because that's like the best education you could get while being in law school. So all in all, I really appreciated the work that I was able to do. While I was there, I was able to help build community partnerships with other local agencies and community organizations, and perform a lot of outreach while I was working as a Rural Summer Legal Corps student fellow. And I appreciated being able to really think outside of the box, understanding that, yes, transportation is really tough for the rural community and the people that we are trying to reach, but also trying to think about new places that we could be able to reach them. So, coming up with ideas like doing outreach at food banks, because that's an area where people do come to get assistance, but now they can also find a contact to receive other assistance for their legal and non-legal issues that we would be able to help. And the amount of client interaction that I was able to have really is worthwhile. Doing this work is very rewarding, and it's modest work, and but it is hard work. And I think that it's important to be able to feel like any little assistance that I was able to do, whether it was just being there and listening to their story, and being able to refer them to a different agency or being able to refer them to a different attorney, was amazing for me, because in some way, even if it was a small way, I was making a difference in somebody else's life and helping them through a time that they were really struggling through. So I really appreciated my experience as a Rural Summer Legal Corps student fellow.
And you were at Legal Services of the Hudson Valley?
Yes, and I was at Legal Services of the Hudson Valley in their Newburgh and Middletown offices.
Great, thank you. That was excellent. Courtney?
Absolutely. So I'm actually originally from Virginia, the Hampton Roads area, so not at all a rural area. But I came to West Virginia for my undergraduate education and actually stayed for law school as well. So the Rural Summer Legal Corps program really attracted me because it gave me the opportunity to stay and serve the state where I went to law school. I was with Legal Aid of West Virginia in the Lewisburg office in the southern part of our state. I was also particularly interested in serving West Virginia because of the opioid epidemic. Obviously, I know we've heard a lot about that, and Adrian mentioned the problems that our state has faced. But in particular, the project that Legal Aid of West Virginia chose for the summer was to focus on improving stability in the lives of children in the southern part of the state. So obviously, the opioid epidemic has affected our state in numerous ways. But I think in particular, that has a lot of impact. It's created upheaval and instability in the lives of those children, a particularly vulnerable population. So I was very much interested in focusing my summer on trying to improve stability for those children through guardianships, adoptions, and custody cases in the southern part of the state. I was also really interested in serving in a rural area because I knew from my time in my undergraduate education and at law school that West Virginia was a very different state from where I'd grown up. There's a lot of unique challenges. Transportation is a huge thing. Buses, like I had in the town where I grew up, really limited access to things like that. Cell service is something that many people don't have in the towns that they live, as well as extremely limited access to the internet, and distance from resources, even from doctors, from therapists, from food banks and things like that. So as a Rural Summer Legal Corps fellow, it kind of allowed me to start thinking creatively about how I could best serve these clients, connect them to the resources that they may need. And also it caused me to have to take some time to really make connections with the folks in these smaller rural counties in order for them to trust me and for them to understand that I was there to help, that I really wanted to serve. And also they have the best knowledge of the resources in their communities that I otherwise wouldn't have known about if I hadn't taken the time to really form those bonds and create those relationships. I also appreciated the opportunity to go to our Lewisburg office because there were only 2 attorneys there. It's, I believe, one of our smallest offices still to this day. So I knew that office was trying to serve, I think, at least 6 counties. So those attorneys had to be overworked and overextended. So the opportunity for me to be able to try to grow my skills as an attorney in that office while also kind of helping decrease their workload and assist in any way that I could was extremely attractive to me. And my time in the Lewisburg office and with Legal Aid of West Virginia was extremely rewarding. And the staff that I worked with was incredibly welcoming. As a 2L student going into my 3L year, the attorneys encouraged me to learn constantly, to ask questions, to get involved with their caseloads, and to shadow them in kind of a vast array of different kinds of cases to expose me to many areas of the law. And they also supervised me and allowed me to represent my first client with supervision, which is a domestic violence victim. And I think that that's really connected me to my work today. As a staff attorney, I'm the Victims of Crime Act attorney, and I serve primarily domestic violence victims today. And I got my start as a summer fellow. I also appreciated that my Rural Summer Legal Corps experience really reaffirmed my decision to become an attorney. I think in my 1L and 2L years, I didn't quite feel connected to what I was learning about. I wasn't quite sure where I may fit in and what kind of role I wanted to play in the legal community when I graduated. And I really felt after my summer that public interest was the area for me, and I wanted to be able to continue to serve particularly rural clients in our state. And I have really no plans to ever leave the state of West Virginia. It's been a wonderful experience for me, and a wonderful experience as a Rural Summer Legal Corps fellow.
Great, thank you very much. And Case, tell us about your work in Indian country.
I'm going to answer the rural issue first about why I chose rural. I'm from Tahlequah. Is anybody familiar with where Tahlequah is? I'm so glad to see so many people shake their head, because usually if I'm telling out-of-state Oklahomans I'm from Tahlequah, I kind of get an unusual look of, is that Tulsa? Is that Oklahoma City? So we're in a really rural area. But what's distinct from my community is that we're home to 2 different tribal nations, the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma and the United Kituwa Band of Cherokees. So we face the rural aspects of, issues with lack of internet access, lack of telephone access, lack of transportation. We're also facing like jurisdictional issues, land issues, water rights issues, hunting issues. Indian children being removed out of their homes to place in non-Native communities, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. These are a lot of the epidemics and a lot of legal issues that we face, and it's a lot of the same in much of Oklahoma. Oklahoma's home to 38 federally recognized tribes. So while I'm bear witnessing to this growing up in Tahlequah, many of our communities are also facing the same struggles. So that was kind of, me bear witnessing to all these legal issues is kind of what stemmed me wanting to go into law school. We want to better our communities. We want to see a change going on. So that's when I found Rural Summer Legal Corps opportunity. And as a law student, I was a broke law student. I don't know much about you all, but I didn't have very much. And law school teaches you the law. They don't teach you how to be a lawyer. So as a law student, I was always looking for that opportunity to try to figure out, the tools I needed once I graduated. How do I do this thing called being a lawyer? And Rural Summer Legal Corps also allowed the financial aspect. It gave me that security of knowing I could pay bills over the summer when I wasn't in law school. I'm also a mom. I have 2 daughters, and so it's kind of like, if I go volunteer somewhere else, then I'm putting in a bind of, can I put food on the table? So Rural Summer Legal Corps allowed that aspect of having that financial stability, but also allowing me to gain that experience that I needed to become a lawyer. And what's specific to this program that I loved was that I got to design a program, design a specific project that was tailored to a specific need in our communities. And at the time, one of the biggest aspects we faced, a lot of our tribal members faced, was land issues. We have a lot of natural disasters going on. A lot of title is not kept up to date, so a lot of what my specific project was to go out to the communities itself. Let's take away that burden of them having to travel to us, having to call in. So we would go out and go to those communities, distinct, where there was a huge population of Native Americans, and we'd set up a will clinic. That way we could be there face to face, and that way we could tell them what their issues were going in with trust land issues, restricted land issues, mineral rights issues. And what I enjoyed most was the fact that I could be face to face. I got to gain that interviewing skills that I use today. And I was also able to show tribal members that it was okay. It's hard culturally to open up to just strangers, telling them, this is my land, this is what's going on, but I don't know what to do with it. It's more hesitant, we're more reserved. And I know that because I grew up in mine. If I wasn't a lawyer, you wouldn't get me in a private practice to open up to a lawyer and tell them all that, open up my business to, to a total stranger. So for them, they got to see someone who looked like them, someone who, grew up in the same communities. To let them know that I wasn't trying to swindle their land from them. I could actually tell them that, give them that protection of your land's going to be protected. It's going to your children. It's going to your grandchildren. And so the tools I use in Rural Summer Legal for are still things I use today. It gained valuable experience in getting to kind of see the aspects that our tribal members face, the hurdles they have to go through just to learn about their land issues. Just to get titles and deeds and everything, you got to reach out to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and sometimes those regional offices are like 2 or 3 hours away. And with someone without transportation, there's just no way. And then once they do get the form that says, well, here's everything that has your land on it, it's hard to read. When I was in law school as a 3L, I took back a sample, what we call an ITI report, an individual trust interest report, that says how much land they own, how much mineral interest. And I took it to a classroom full of, to-be lawyers, and asked them, I'll give you $5 right now if you can tell me how much land these people own. And nobody could read it. And so if you don't have this distinct, well-rehearsed and experienced lawyers going out in these communities, they're not getting the adequate legal representations they have. So I could go on and on. I think I'm at my time limit. So that's the reason why I got to Rural Summer Legal Corps.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Case. And I want to thank our Rural Summer Legal Corps fellows who are here and talked about their experience. They're phenomenal. I feel good about the next future generation of lawyers. But one of the things that was raised earlier in the panel was the difficulty of getting lawyers to I guess lawyer deserts, we will call them now. So I know Amy, the University of Arkansas, has started a rural practice incubator. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how you run that?
Sure. And so we, at the Bowen School of Law, we looked at these numbers of, we have dwindling populations of attorneys in rural areas. Those attorneys are getting close to retirement age. Some are past retirement age and just can't find someone to take over their practice. We also have that same population are the judges on the bench. So in a lot of counties, we have attorneys who are wearing several different hats. And once they leave their practice, there won't be anyone to serve as the prosecutor or the public defender, to serve in their private practice capacity, or to serve as district judge. So they're wearing a lot of different hats, but it also presents a great opportunity for students. A lot of the students that come to Little Rock are rural students who indicate that they want to go home to their home counties, but they're not exactly sure how. So in 2015, the Access to Justice Commission did some research along with pro bono partners and a professor who came from Arkansas to look at what were those barriers. And some of those barriers were student loans, which is a big barrier for everyone, but a lot of them were not knowing how to make a practice work. But Bowen developed a rural practice incubator, which provides some startup funds, small amount, but more than that, business planning, legal assistance in helping to develop your business plan, forms and legal technology so they can go out and have the tools they need to start their practice. Free CLE with our both local bar and our state bars, mentoring from our trial lawyers, and like I said, a small amount of financial assistance. So we're just finishing our first class, which was 5 attorneys who went out into rural areas. 2 went into the Southeast Delta area, 1 went into Northeast, and then 2 went into the Southwest area of the state. So we've got 5 attorneys who are finishing up their 18-month part in the program. As part of that, they do 100 hours of pro bono service, and they're all doing very successful in different ways. So it's been a great program. We're looking at how to increase incentives to get students to rural areas after they graduate. A big part of that is figuring out, is there a way we can get loan forgiveness or other financial incentives to help them ease that transition? Because there is an economic opportunity there, but it's just getting them to the point where they can take advantage of that. In the future, we're looking more at the matchmaking, finding those attorneys who are looking to retire and matching them up with students so they can learn from them for a couple of years, and then also more rural student practice fellowships so they can get more experiences in that.
It's a great idea. Thank you very much. And so Adrian and John, knowing that you need attorneys elsewhere, and what are some of the strategies you employ to get attorneys to come work for your organization, in addition to Courtney?
Well, actually, I was delighted to hear that Courtney wants to stay in West Virginia, since I heard that Mr. Asher to my right was telling her how beautiful Colorado is. John.
I did say that.
One of the things that we are struggling with is a crisis. The lack of attorneys available currently is limiting our ability to fill existing positions that are a part of normal turnover, but also we've been very successful in expanding our services. Right now, we have 5 attorney vacancies spread over 7 offices, and we're really struggling to find a qualified pool of individuals that we would want to hire to work for our program. We have a single law school in the state, and we are working with them to get students in the pipeline. Many of our existing attorneys have come from West Virginia University. The Rural Summer Legal Corps program has been wonderful as a tool to get folks in the door. And we know that we have to do some internal work as well. We are currently doing a salary market survey because we know our salaries are too low. Our starting salary for attorneys at Legal Aid of West Virginia is $42,000 a year, and we know that we need to raise that to be more competitive, so that in turn feeds into a resource issue. So I don't know that we have a good solution. We're in the midst of a crisis. We're looking to other programs around the country. We're talking to our state bar and our Access to Justice Commission to figure out how we can get highly qualified, good folks in those seats that we have.
Great. And John?
Well, we look at this both as an immediate short-term problem and a long-term issue as well, and try to address both of them. But by way of example, I was asked by a justice on the Colorado Supreme Court who still teaches an Access to Justice seminar at the University of Colorado Law School to speak to her seminar class about legal services and sort of public interest, pro bono and the like. And there were 15 students at the end of my presentation, and questions I asked, how many of the 15 might be willing to go and practice in a rural area in Colorado or anywhere else? 1 out of the 15 raised a hand. A young man said he grew up in Durango in far southwest Colorado, and he might be willing to go back for a year or 2. I mean, that's the interest, we have to stimulate that. Short term, we work closely with the 2 law schools. We try to get externs to go to rural areas. We're trying to get both law schools to start a similar summer fellowship program for rural areas. And we are really doing what we can in the Southwest to try to attract diverse lawyers both to our urban offices, but also to work in rural Colorado. If anybody here has heard Lajuna is the best cantaloupe in the world, and you can start Monday morning in our Lajuna office. As a matter of fact, it's on the Arkansas, it's on the, we know where that river starts in Colorado. So, but more broadly, we're trying to build partnerships with not just the law schools, but the state bar. The State Bar of Colorado has a number of sections, none on rural practice. They don't have a unique opportunity for rural lawyers to get together and look at their sort of unique legal problems. They are having trouble recruiting it. We're working with the University of Colorado Medical School, both to build a medical legal partnership based on our pro bono grant, where we would use Denver Metro lawyers to link to rural health clinics to provide telelaw, just as we do telemedicine increasingly and the like. But the medical school is ahead of us on loan forgiveness for doctors going to rural areas, and there's much we can work with on them. We are working with bars in local communities to develop a marketing plan. And lastly, we're working with the governor's office of Colorado. I see attracting lawyers to rural Colorado, legal aid and private, is a broad issue, but no different than attracting doctors, accountants, entrepreneurs. And the governor needs to see economic development and the continued vibrancy of rural America as a broad issue that includes access to legal assistance for small businesses, for people with farms who need estate planning. And I think if we get a better pipeline, some of those people will be attracted to public service and legal aid as well.
Great, thank you. I'm going to wrap it up with the Rural Summer Legal Corps Fellows and give them 1 minute to give us, to share their final thoughts on legal aid in rural America. So Carmel, would you like to start us off?
Sure. So I guess thinking about like legal services and providing legal aid in rural America, I think about it as a very rewarding experience, not just in being able to help these people out in a time of crisis, but also as a means of really feeding my own personal passions for wanting to help people and like feeding my soul. You know, I go to sleep and wake up every morning excited to help the people that are in need of my help and are looking for that help and can't seem to find it. So I like the fact that I'm able to be there, and I think that this is an amazing thing that we all do when we provide assistance like this.
Courtney?
I feel hopeful about the future of legal aid in rural America. I've had a very rewarding experience from being a fellow to a post-grad fellow and finally a staff attorney serving domestic violence victims. And I'm going to continue that work and strongly encourage students from our law school to join us in this struggle to serve these clients.
Great. Case?
I can't stress like how important and vital work Rural Summer Legal Corps does, and it's mutually beneficial on all sides of it. You know, it gives the law students the experience that they need. It helps the host site and alleviate some of the issues they have going on if they're undermanned or underwoman. And you know, it helps our rural community, you know, receive that access to justice that we're lacking. So,
Great. Thank you. I'd like to thank our panelists today for all of their input and